Did you ever wish you had someone to tell you the truth about what it takes to run a successful business and live a fulfilling life? Well, my friend, you've come to the right place. So grab your favorite caffeinated jolt or cocktail and your courage and get ready to get to work. I'm Janessa Borges, a therapist, mindset coach for entrepreneurs, and a feisty Latina from Miami. I've been referred to as a trailblazing powerhouse with relentless energy and outside-the-box ideas. And I'm determined to teach you the exact tools you need to stop settling and start kicking some serious derriere. What do you say? Are you in? Then let's get started. Welcome to the Success Mindset for Entrepreneurs podcast. Welcome to the first episode of a 3-part series with my personal business attorney and legal coach, Lisa Fraley. You know I like to keep these episodes short and sweet because you're busy creating an empire. Lisa specializes in helping entrepreneurs in legally protecting the business they work so hard to create. I asked Lisa the most asked and juiciest questions all entrepreneurs want to know about contracts, especially when you're just starting off or new to the legal side of protecting your business. So sit back, grab a pen, and get ready to absorb all this life-changing info. Trust me, you won't want to miss 1 second. Lisa, I am so excited that you're with me and I am so honored, and I'm going to brag about you a little bit. So Lisa Fraley is a licensed attorney who is also a coach that specifically works with entrepreneurs as a legal coach, all terms that you've coined, right, as well. And I want to talk about that too. But I'm so excited because I know you've been in all the worlds, right? You've been in the traditional attorney world and you've done the coaching, health coaching and all that industry. And then now you specialize, which is why I asked you to join us today. You specialize working specifically with entrepreneurs. So I will start off saying that therapists, just like attorneys, I'm sure, are not trained on the business side of their practice. We're taught all of the formalities. We are brushed up on our clinical skills or all our legal skills, but running a business and what you need for that, clueless. So at least for me, or the people that I've found at least. So I want to make sure that I want to completely pick your brain. You know, Lisa has been my go-to attorney since I found her over 2 years ago. We've done everything, oh my God, from business structures to trademarking to so many things. And I want to talk about all of the areas that all clinicians and entrepreneurs, regardless of what stage they're in their business, really should know, because I think people don't ask questions to what they don't know. They go to Google, and people don't realize that you really need to be covered. And I love your, be legally covered so you can be yourself. And I love that concept. So I will stop rambling. Please give my listeners some history about you and how you even came here so they get to know you and love you as much as I do.
Janessa, first of all, thank you for that welcome. That was so nice of you. I do love that we have known each other for 2 years and have both grown since we've met each other. And as you know, like you shared, when I started out, I was a traditional attorney working in a large corporate law firm, and I was a healthcare attorney. So I'm very familiar with licensed practitioners like therapists. Thank you all for the work that you do as therapists. Mm-hmm. The world needs you. Mm-hmm. And understanding licensure issues and figuring out what you can do in your state and things like that. And then as I left the law firm after surviving on caffeine and sugar and all the things that are bad for you, mm-hmm. and really ending up with walking depression, which you clinically, of course, have another name for, but I just call walking depression in my layperson's language. I left the law firm and worked with a life coach myself. And that led me to going to life coaching school at Coach U, and then to health coaching school eventually at IIN, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And then, as you mentioned, I started working with health coaches. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm out in this health coaching world, Janessa, and all these health coaches and heart-centered online entrepreneurs and people who just don't like the law. The law feels yucky and cold and scary and corporate and all the things that we don't like. had questions. And so I ended up bringing it all together and drawing on my legal expertise as a licensed attorney, of course, and the love and the care that I bring as a coach, which is why I have this lighted ampersand marquee on my wall, because it's an and to bring the coaching and the law together to help people know what steps to take legally, to make it easy, to make it accessible, to make it not as expensive, and to just infuse some love and light into the law, which we all so desperately need.
And I love the way you packaged it. So I love, and part of the heart-centered work that you do is the fact that you're just yourself. And I remember I went through, I think I have a binder with all of your podcast show notes. And one of, yes, I'm a raving fan, Lisa.
I love that. Thank you for telling me that.
Of course. Well, but that's even part, it took me a long time to get to my journey on podcasts, and I was pushing it off, and everybody says it's so much work, but had I've met and learned, know, like, and trust factor, like Marie teaches us, through listening. And had I not taken the time to listen to your podcast, I would have never learned about you or decided to work with you. And it's by far the best decision I've made in my practice legally.
Oh, Janessa, thank you. That is such a compliment. I know we found each other because of Marie Forleo's B-School program. And it really means a lot to me that you have listened to the podcast episodes, because when you create a podcast like you're doing right now, which is such a gift to the world, you don't really know who's listening or if anyone's taking any information from this. And, I put a lot of love into the Legally Enlightened podcast, just like you're putting into this podcast. So thank you for letting me know that, because anything we can do to help people know, in your case, how to build a business, how to run a successful clinical practice, and in my case, what legal steps to take when, it's nice to get that in like a bite-sized digestible piece. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Yes. And that is my favorite thing. And one of the stories that I remember you telling was how you were in this corporate world and you just didn't feel like you fit in. Like you were like pink and sparkly and all these good things. And then there were these people with suits and you were good with you, but it just didn't match. And I think so many entrepreneurs can relate the same. They just don't feel like I fit in the world that I'm in, and I want more and I want to do more for others. So that was my whole connection. And that's what I gathered. And the second I heard that, I fell in love. And I just, like I said, I binged through, and I want to tell people it's not just about binging through the podcast or getting the freebies. I paid to work with Lisa because you have to value the people that you're working with and what they have to offer. So although I love the information you share, and I think it's so valuable, there truly is nothing like actually getting and working with the person that you're a fan of. So why not work with them? Right?
Exactly.
So that's huge. So I have so many questions. I have a long list of questions, but my first one's going to be, what is the first thing? So I think both of us, I have to go back to that place in my head when I first started. What's the first thing, your biggest tip for somebody starting out brand new?
Absolutely. Okay. So if you're a clinician and you're working in a clinical therapy practice, the first thing that you need, and you may already know this already if you're listening, but if you don't, you want to make sure you're using your informed consent form where you're having your clients agree to understand the benefits and risks of receiving treatment from you, and they're signing on the dotted line. And make sure you have your HIPAA forms in place and they are operating in a HIPAA compliant way to respect the confidentiality and privacy of your client. So getting their consent in a written form and HIPAA is the first step for you, I think, as a clinician. If you're a heart-centered entrepreneur and you're not a licensed practitioner, you're not a licensed therapist, you have a different type of a business, then the first step for most people when they work one-on-one with a client is to have a written client agreement. Now, the client agreement is a document that you sign and that your client signs to agree to the program that you're offering, what's included in the program, what your expectations are around the program, how payment works, how communication works, what happens if you have a conflict, disclaimers. It's really your legal document that you can make sure you're both on the same page and have a meeting of the minds about, so that you can go forward in your client relationship with clarity and feeling safe and feeling secure and knowing everyone's on the same page.
Love it. So as you're talking, I thought of something else. So we're going to say hypothetically off the record. Let's say that we have somebody who's worked at an agency or is a clinician or whatever type of entrepreneur they are. And they're like, well, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to copy the documents that are using at where I am now, which I'm sure a lot of people instinctually do, which is better than nothing, but they're not protected. So Question is, why not? And I know that you're big on this. Why not copy other people's contracts?
Great question. Yes, I am big on this for a couple of different reasons. First, if you're using a informed consent form for an agency, for example, that may be very different in certain parts as to what you need as your own solo practice. So the language may not exactly apply to your specific situation. That's just how it is. Once I had a client go to an online legal platform and download a contract for her business, and it turned out to be a contract for a construction company, but she didn't know that,
of course,
because she didn't know, and that's fine. So you just want to be super careful because the language in the document may not be what you need. The second reason is because, well, there's three really. The second reason is because you may not realize it's actually not legal to do that. If you have agreed to terms, or if the document has a copyright on it, or if you are in an arrangement with a lawyer, it's kind of similar to taking someone's content that you didn't pay for. And there may be terms that you're violating if you do that. Even if someone's being kind and just sharing the document with you because they're being loving and they're being kind and they're trying to help you out and you're trying to save money because you're just starting out, like, I get it. And it's also not ideal to do from a legal standpoint, and then also energetically. I do align all the legal steps with chakras, and I do believe the law is energetic as well as practical in terms of language you can fall back on legally. But energetically, you want the document to be aligned with you. This is not how normal lawyers talk. I recognize that.
And I love it though.
Well, a lot of my clients do, but you want the document to feel aligned with you and be infused with your energy. And if you're just copying and taking someone else's, you often don't know what it says. You don't know what it means. You don't know how it's protecting you. And then that can also leave energetic gaps and holes because you haven't really shored up your own legal boundary.
So what Lisa's trying to say very kindly is it's not good karma and it's stealing. That's just me. But this is the reality. It's just not good. And you're not setting yourself up for success, and you're leaving. I'm a loophole person, and there are so many loopholes, and you don't want to fall in the midst of a loophole. Lisa, I know there's a million different scenarios we can think of, but generally, if somebody decides not to protect themselves fully legally, what does that open you up to?
Yeah, great question. So it depends on the context, right? So when you're working with a client in a clinical setting, you do want to make sure that you have gotten their informed consent to be able to provide treatment for them. I'm sure that's drilled into you since you've gone through your graduate school and become licensed, but it's really important so that you have proof that that client or patient, depending on your setting, has agreed for you to provide treatment and agreed that and made sure they know the risks and make sure that they aren't declining treatment or things like that. When it comes to mental health, you need to have that written backing for your records, for your medical records, and as proof. There's other areas as well. So for example, if you are a non-licensed practitioner and you don't have a client agreement in place, for example, and you don't have a written document, you don't have anything to fall back on if that client doesn't pay you for your program. You don't have anything in writing that says, I'm not giving you medical advice or mental health advice over here as a coach or a mentor or whatever it is that you're doing. And so when you don't have something in writing, in either case, whether you're a clinician or you're not a clinician, it's really hard to prove. That's why in graduate school, they teach you how to take copious medical records and notes as a therapist. And over here in the coaching world, that's why I try to really drill into your head with love that you need a written client agreement for you and the client to sign, so you're both on the same page and you have a written document to fall back on.
Yes. And I love this. And I can go so many different places with this. I love that you're addressing both clinicians and coaches, because as you know, because you're the same situation, I am both. I am both a clinician and a coach, just as you're an attorney and a coach. And although it's similar work, it's not the same. And two different scenarios that I can think of is a lot of times clinicians are so excited to work with clients, and either there's tech issues or there's time issues, and they just say, fill that out later for me. Or just give me your verbal now and then we'll get it later. I know it's a big no-no, but I want people to understand from a professional attorney, not just from me, that verbal is just not good enough.
It's not. It's not. And I'm glad you mentioned people who are both a clinician and a coach. Like what, for me, I'm a lawyer in one business. Like I have one LLC as a lawyer and I have a whole separate business as an LLC as a coach. You don't want to be doing them both in the same business. You can't, right? You can't be a licensed practitioner on the one hand and a non-licensed practitioner in the same business. Like it just doesn't work that way. With one, as a therapist or clinician, you're working with patients. Whether you call them clients or not, they're still treating medical patients and you're a licensed medical practitioner. And if you're a coach, you're not working with patients, you're working with clients. So you definitely need, in either case, to get this in writing before you work with the client. And you know, what's really effective is for you to be able to say to them, you know, part of what we do to have you to work as a patient or to be enrolled in my coaching program is to sign this document. You can schedule your first appointment with me, but we won't have your first appointment until I receive your written document, either your informed consent or your client agreement. And guess what? That client or patient will get you that written form, because literally if they don't have it by the first call, you need to reschedule that call. You need to not have that appointment with them, because the minute you start working with them, it's much harder, A, to collect the document, and B, to enforce it, because you've already now started sort of a practice, a pattern of practice, we call it in law, where they could argue that the contract was already formed orally or informally by your behavior rather than the written document. It's just much harder to go backwards than it is to go forward.
1,000%. And that's what I really want to focus on, because people don't realize these mistakes until it's too late.
I know.
They don't know that.
You want to get going with you're so excited. You want to get going, but really, please don't have your first appointment or your first call until you get that written document signed.
And I try to hit home, but people just feel, until they're in it, they just kind of brush it off. And I literally say, they say, what do I do if they're on the call? And I say, you wait until the signature is done, or you reschedule. Or if they're in your office, no problem. It'll take a few minutes of our session, but I need you to sign these documents.
Yep.
Because not only does it create a financial problem, right, if you're not being paid, but the liability, we can talk about that for years. The liability that you open yourself up to is incredible, because now they can say you promised them anything and you don't have in writing what that relationship looks like.
Exactly. I'm so glad you're helping people know that, Janessa, because it's really, really important, and it can become just an easy flowing part of your enrollment conversation with a person, or to enroll them as a new patient or to enroll them as a coaching client. It's really easy to just make it flow. It doesn't have to be difficult. And I love the fact you suggest to take time at the beginning of the session or reschedule the session if they don't have the document done.
There's always an option. There's always something we can look at. And I'm going to go with our conversation. So I know the answers because we've had a long conversation about this, but 2 years ago, when I realized that I was an entrepreneur, not just a therapist that had her own business, that it was a word, I realized, okay, I want to coach Lisa, and I want to make sure, I can just coach, right? And we had a very long, extensive conversation. And my short version, when anybody asks me, is you just always want to protect everything you've worked so hard for. You want to protect your license. I say, that's what my business attorney advised me. That's my snippet. But if you can legally go a little deeper to explain to people, just because people struggle with the concept, right? I'm already an attorney. I'm already a therapist. Why can't I just coach? It's still me. I can't remove my brain. And this was the conversation we had. I can't remove my intellectual property, from what I'm doing, but the businesses and why they have to be separate, because I know there's a lot of dual action entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, that's right. You want to avoid being in a dual relationship as a therapist. It's not legal to do that, obviously, ethically or legally. But okay, so the reason why we recommend having two businesses is also that I recommend that you have two types of training. Mm-hmm. So I don't recommend, if you're a therapist, just to call yourself a coach and open up another business and be like, oh, I'm a coach now. Because you can't actually practice therapy in a coaching business.
Exactly.
And we don't want coaches to be practicing therapy because they're not trained as a therapist.
Absolutely.
So when you're in a medical relationship, a therapist-patient relationship with your patient, in a medical relationship where you're engaging in therapy and you're using all of your training, they're your patient, and you have to stay in that lane, in that business and in that world. Even though your brain knows more things than that, you do have to know how to draw lines and hold yourself back so that you don't pick up your therapy and bring it over to a coaching world or vice versa. So the way that it works is you only engage in therapy as a medical practitioner with people in your state where you're licensed. It used to be in person, but now we're in COVID. So you can work with telehealth with the laws of your state and just keep yourself safe, stay in your lane, work as a therapist in your lane. If you're a coach or a non-licensed practitioner, you want to have coach training. You want to go through a coach certification program, learn how to think like a coach, use the methodology you learn as a coach. And then when you're working in a coaching business, a separate LLC with a coaching business, you want to take people only through the coaching methodology, not therapy. Only coaching. And in fact, as a coach, if you run into a situation, again, these would not be the same clients as your therapy clients because of the dual relationship. But if you run into a situation where you think this person actually needs greater mental health support, coaches work with people around mindset. But if you get to a place where you realize, this person's had some serious trauma, or I think this person might have anxiety or depression more than generalized anxiety that we all have in COVID right now, you cannot switch into therapy mode and treat them. You cannot, must not. You have to use some self-restraint and refer them to their own therapist.
Yes.
Because coaching and therapy can bump up into each other, but we have to do the best that we can ethically to keep them separate, because you really, you can't be a licensed medical practitioner in the same breath as a non-licensed in the same business. It just doesn't work that way.
Absolutely. And I know that the thought process for a lot of people is, but I'm doing the same thing, but you're not.
No.
And I want to bring this back home to clinicians to help them decipher if you are not well-versed in sexual trauma. That's not your specialty. My hope is you're referring out. So it's the same metaphor. So if you're working with somebody and it goes beyond future pacing, if it deals more with emotional health, that's a therapist role. If somebody's working on like career development or adjustment to like a new role in their life, then that could be, but it's two separate. I need people to understand it's two separate worlds, because there's so much pushback I hear on this. But the importance of what is done and the protection legally is what I really want to focus on as well with everybody. I need them to really understand that.
Yes. And this is where you, as a therapist, if you are interested in having a coaching business, you do want to get trained as a coach. You do only want to limit yourself to the methodology as a coach. You don't want to work with your own patients as a coach. And like you said, Janessa, you want to make sure that you realize, even though you might be trained as a therapist, you are not that client's therapist. You're not in a medical relationship with them. It is not appropriate for you to be. They need to find their own therapist. So, and this happens to me in law too, when I'm working with a client and they ask me a question in my coaching world, I don't answer it as a lawyer there, because I'm not their lawyer. That's not appropriate. Even if I know the answer, I could look it up. I could research it. I may know off the top of my head. I still have to use self-restraint because I'm not the right person in that moment to help them with that. So that is the burden is on you as a practitioner. Just like as a coach, if you think a client's getting into a mental health space, as a coach, you're not trained as a mental health practitioner. So you need to stop and not go there and say, this is concerning me. It feels like this might be an area where you need more support. So I refer you to talk to a therapist or another counselor or mental health provider so that you can get support for that issue while we stay over here in our lane and work on mindset or future pacing or your goals or your blocks of what's getting in the way of your goal. Totally different fields. These are not the same professions at all. And the more people can keep that clear, it will help keep you safe, legally protected, but also will help you just not confuse the two professions, because they really aren't interchangeable at all.
No, but people don't realize that. So I'm so glad. I love what you said is stay in your lane. So if it's not in your lane, don't go there.
In fact, real quick, Janessa, it's actually easier. Once we kind of have this mindset, it's actually easier to keep the lane separate.
Absolutely.
It's much easier to have two clear pathways than like this murky middle ground. So like separate it and your life will actually be easier and you'll be safer.
And I know oftentimes I hear so much from entrepreneurs, especially when they're starting off and they're not making money yet. And they say, you know what, Janessa, I just don't have the money. And I wanted to finish saying, you can't afford not to legally protect yourself and your business and everything you've worked so hard for. So if there's anything that people are going to invest in, it's their legal area of their business because it's protecting them and themselves. So, Lisa, I don't know if there's any final words you want to say. I'm so grateful for your time. And my whole thing is, like I always say, Lisa's my go-to business attorney. And I don't recommend people I don't believe in. I've worked with you directly and listened to all your advice and read your book. And I think you're beyond amazing. And you can't afford not to get the support that you need when you're starting a business.
Janessa, thank you so much for those kind words. And just to encourage everyone to get their legal support, please work with an attorney that you know and you like and you trust, but be sure that that attorney understands the work that you do. Like, you don't want to be working with a real estate attorney if you're a therapist. You don't want to work with a family attorney if they don't understand coaching. Be sure you're working with an attorney who understands the work that you do. I'm also happy to help you if I'm able to do so. And just know that you can get started. It's not as expensive as you think. It doesn't have to be as expensive as you think. The DIY legal templates can each start with a one payment of $107 to get a template, and you can do 4 payments. Like, what lawyer does that?
That's a no-brainer to me completely.
So give yourself the gift of the legal protection to help you feel safe and secure and confident and empowered. And then keep learning from Janessa, because she has done a fabulous job at getting her business situated, obviously having the gift of being a therapist and a coach, but working with different clients separately and helping to structure 2 different businesses. She knows what she's doing. So thank you for your leadership, Janessa, and thank you for inviting me to join you. And thank you, everyone, for the work that you're doing, whether you're a therapist or whether you're a coach, because the world really needs all of this support in the mental health field and also in the coaching field. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been an honor as always. So much amazing info, right? As I promised, I have links to all the resources we talked about, including Lisa's book and links to her DIY templates, which are a no-brainer for any entrepreneur who loves their business. Visit janmarietlc.com/7 for episode 7 to get your hands on everything now. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited you tuned in. The best way to find out the second a new episode is released and receive all the valuable tools and actionable steps I share is to subscribe to the podcast, so make sure you do that. If there are any topics you'd like addressed, or if you have any burning questions you want answered, visit janmarietlc.com/podcast. And make sure to share this with any other entrepreneur friends that you know can benefit from learning the mindset it takes to create a business and life they truly love. And last but definitely not least, I would love your feedback. So leave a review and I'll make sure to share that love on a future podcast episode. Sending you so much love. Until next time.